I'd like to introduce, first of all, Jennifer Haley, who's the playwright. And then also Jeremy Herrin, who directed the Nether tonight, who's the artist director. So the format of interview today is I'm going to ask a couple of introductory questions to Jen and Jeremy, and then we'll open it up to the audience so that you can ask some questions to them as well. So I just want to start with Jen. What inspired you to write the play? Where did this whole thing start?
It's kind of a long answer, actually. I had a playwriting teacher of mine say, "Write what you hate." She would throw that out as a kind of, truism or something every once in a while, and had a new play brewing, and I was thinking about this thing of write what you hate. And I have a particular hatred for CSI-style procedurals. I just think they're sort of gruesome, and the interrogation scenes are really packed, and they always get the bad guy, and after 40 minutes it's all wrapped up and done. It's all so easy. So I was thinking, what about some kind of procedural for the stage, and what kind of interrogation scene would I like to write? And I've been interested in video games and virtual reality for a long time, so I was thinking about, what if someone's done something so awful online, and it's a virtual space, so it's very real? And then that took me to what's something so awful, we don't really want people doing it even virtually, which led me to pedophilia. So then I was like, do I have to write a play about pedophilia? But I felt like to kind of really get into the ethical question of it, that it did have to be something on that line, something that we didn't really want to get into, but so why not? Oh, and then the final twist was then, what if no one involved is actually a child? What are the ethics of that? So that was all brewing before I even started it. It was kind of an interesting sort of month-long mental process.
And in terms of how you feel about, obviously you have a lot of experience with technology, and you're very, very technology savvy. So in terms of how do your own feelings about technology and where that might be taking us come into and inform the play?
Just writing the play has been a journey for me in terms of figuring out how I feel about it, because it was this very interesting intellectual exercise for me at first. And even when I began the play and started writing it, it began to have these emotional shapes to it with the Mr. Doyle/Iris character. That's when the emotion came in, but still it was very much a concept-driven play for me. Then I started doing some research and found out that there had been this Japanese video game where you, as the player, could kidnap a woman and her two prepubescent children on public transportation and take them home and do awful things to them. This was a real game, and the public was so outraged by it that they were losing sales on their other games. So the game company pulled the game. It doesn't exist anymore for purchase. But when I read about that, I was like, wait a minute, this is not right. Suddenly I felt this moral indignation. I felt very strongly that should not be a game that is offered to people, and that people should be allowed to play. So, whereas before I was kind of like, oh, this is very interesting to think about. Finding out that there was kind of a real life version of this made me think about it a different way. So
just moving on to Jeremy, how did you find out about Jennifer's play, and what drew you to it as a director?
Well, I was reading the plays that had done well in the Cecil Smith Blackburn Awards, which is an award for British and American plays by female playwrights, and Jen had won that in 2013? You won that 2012. So I just read it, just on a sort of pure speculative foray, and it was such a fantastic play. I've been reading over the years, from time at the Royal Court, playwrights trying to grapple with the internet and trying to put the internet on stage, and I'd never read a play that successfully managed to theatricalise it, or to deal with any of the issues. And The Nether was the first play that I thought really came to grips with it and really explored it. And crucially, Jen had found a way to put it on stage by not putting it on stage, if you see what I mean. There was something really sort of fantastic, I thought, about something really fantastically producible about the kind of that sort of icky neo-Victorian world that you represent, and those choices just spoke of a playwright of great intelligence. And you know, I think the play is a deeply complex and complicated bit of work that manages to look at something very, very dangerous and very difficult, that feels to me an incredibly contemporary subject in a multi-dimensional way, which is obviously a great thing in terms of playwriting. So that's how I came to it, and that's why I responded to it.
And obviously then with the staging is very multi-dimensional as
Yeah.
well. So what was the journey from sort of the play in your imagination to the kind of realisation of it that we saw on stage this evening?
Well, I mean, what our mission was with Ez, the designer, and Luke, the video, and Paul, he did the lights, as well as Ian, he did the sound, and Nick also, he did the music, was to try and represent the feeling of the Hideaway. And it didn't feel quite right to do a very naturalistic, sort of simple, representational version of a kind of neo-Victorian house, because that wouldn't quite sum up the feeling that all the characters had for it. So in pure design terms, it was about bouncing the audience from one world to another, and trying to support the idea behind the play that that due to the environmental collapse, because of the loss of the trees and all of this, that the environment that the interrogation scenes will take place in is a world that's falling apart, and yet the world of the imagination represented by the Hideaway is a place that is wonderful to be. And theatrically, we wanted to really complicate it for the audience, to make that a desirable space to keep returning to, and therefore to complicate the audience's moral compass in some way, by making them desire the shutters to open and to get back in there to see what terrible things are going to happen. And there's something just about those trees in that space, and the sort of freedom and the light, and it feels like the air that's in there, and the mirrors that make it an attractive environment to go into. And it afforded Luke, who did the video design, a really wonderful opportunity, I think, to bounce between the two. That's the kind of glue that sticks both of those worlds together, and that's just a wonderful opportunity to see a video artist at the top of his game. So it just seems like all great plays, you know, without having the desire to smother it in production, it seemed to inspire everybody's, you know, best day at work. So it was a privilege.
Jan, I just want to ask you a little bit about how you came to playwriting in the first place. So what's your original background, and how did you find yourself, you know, here in the middle of the West End stage with a successful play on?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Jeremy, thank you for reading the Susan Smith Blackburn plays, because you would be surprised at how few theaters read those 12 plays, or even read the top 3. Which also takes me to, I started writing for theater when I was a senior in college, and I'd been an actress for a few years, and I was pretty frustrated with most of the kinds of roles that came my way. So I was just like, well, I'm going to write a role for myself, I'm going to write a play for myself. So I just started writing, you know, things that, you know, it started with me writing a role for myself, and then it expanded into whatever role it was, would I enjoy playing it, and I kind of brought with me what I had learned as an actor into, you know, in terms of objective and intention and the rhythms that I had kind of absorbed as an actor.
Oh, and then did you study somewhere, or did you just find the experience that you'd had working with theatre?
No, then I wrote, you know, I self-produced and I wrote for several years, and I eventually, I tried to get into graduate school, I came close, I didn't get in, became a web designer, and then I finally was like, well, and then I kept spending all the money I made at web design producing my plays, so I was like, all right, I guess I should really, really try to go for this. And I finally got into graduate school at Brown University and studied with Paula Vogel for 2 years, and that really kind of changed my, you know, really kind of cemented the craft portion of it for me.
Did you find that your writing changed very much during those 2 years?
Yes, greatly. Yes, she really encouraged me to experiment with language and experiment with form, and really pushed that, and suddenly I found myself writing in ways that I didn't think I could write or had never thought about writing, and kind of got rid of a lot of what I thought were the rules of writing or the rules of narrative, and then we're kind of able to pull that back in again once I've thrown them away. It's kind of interesting, hard to describe. It's like, it is kind of like still working with a material, even though it feels ephemeral because it's just language.
And in terms of sort of, you know, where do you think you might be headed next? What are you interested in at the moment, now that this sort of play is up and running?
I know this is probably a bad theater person thing to say, but I am moving into television because I'm kind of, well, and it's not, I think it's, for one thing, I think the Nether is kind of, I've been working on plays steadily for so many years, and this is kind of a punctuation. I feel like I've come to the end of a chapter. This is kind of the end of a certain chapter, and I still have plays that are in development that I'm moving forward. And I think so I'm ready for like a new challenge, and I'm ready to have an even larger conversation. But I also, in this strange way, what I feel like is going to happen is I'm going to move into that space, and then I'm going to come back to this space and want to do something even crazier. Like then completely throw away narrative or move into more of an experimental place. But for me, I think it's going to be continuing to challenge myself and play with different forms.
I'm just going to ask Jeremy one more question, and then we'll open it out to the room. I just want to ask, so at the moment, you're directing The Absence of War, which is on tour at the moment nationally, as well as...
It's important not to get them mixed up.
They're very, very similar. So I just want to ask sort of, what you felt the relationship is between, you know, the West End as a kind of sort of entity, but also the other work that you do, the taking the shows out on tour nationally, and how you feel that those two sort of work together.
Well, I suppose, you know, the company like Headlong, it's about a broad spectrum of work that we do, and it's about communicating ideas to audiences wherever we can find them, and it's something particularly thrilling about. Thank you very much, everybody, for staying, for coming to see the show. It's really terrific. But an audience is an audience, and deserves sort of intelligent and engaged work, which I hope that you feel that you got this evening. And it's about just taking that around the country and around the world, ideally. So it feels all part of a continuum, and the fact that we put this up at the Royal Court in the summer and it went well, the fact that we can bring it into the West End is just because, you know, we hope and we gamble that there's an audience for it. It doesn't feel like the most typical West End so-called commercial theatre fare, but that's a fantastic reason to bring it into a theatre like this, I think. And I think with a producer like Sonia Friedman, who is incredibly brave at backing her hunches and backing the art and backing theatre that's properly engaged, then it's brilliant for us at Headlong to have a partner like that. So it feels like it's all part of the same gesture, which is to communicate intelligently with audiences.
Brilliant. So, would anyone like to ask a question to either Jen or Jeremy or both of them at the same time? Yes.
Jen, when you're writing a play like this, how much do you visualise how it might be produced in the theatre? Or how much of that is purely left up to the director and the stage designers?
So Jen, I'm just going to repeat the question. So when you're writing a play like this, how much do you visualise what the play looks like in the theatre, and how much do you leave it up to the director and the designers to realise that?
Well, Jeremy could tell you that if you look at the script, there are absolutely no stage directions except some very basic sort of stage directions. So I don't say how it should look, and I really didn't have any idea about how it should look at all. It actually seemed very simple to me. You know, we go between these two different spaces, and then when it came time to start designing the first production, it suddenly became clear how tricky it is to go back and forth between the interrogation room and the hideaway without, you know, one thing I always said was no wagons. I don't want anyone like sliding on and sliding off. So how do you do that without it creating a tennis match? And then it became clear to me that it was actually incredibly difficult to design, and the transitions are very challenging, but it's only, that never occurred to me. I don't see it, I only see it tonally, I don't see it visually. I don't work that, yeah. Just like I don't hear music, I can never be a musician.
But for me, if I can add, for me that's the most fantastic type of writing, because it means that Jen is writing with no limits to her imagination, and it gives me and my lot some, until you get it, lots of, long evenings and lots of head scratching. But when you kind of crack the formula, when you crack the code of it, so to speak, it's extremely gratifying. Particularly because it's not laid down like a George Bernard Shaw 3-page scenic description at the top of the play to tell you exactly how to do it, which for me and my team isn't so interesting, And it's about having permission to dig underneath the play and not necessarily doing it literally. In the middle there, I don't think you can see.
This guy here?
No, this lady here.
Where's
put
the
her hand up
back?
there, she's standing
Brilliant,
there.
do you want to shout?
I'm a loud American, I think you'll hear. I was curious about the development of the play. I think one of the neat things about theater is through the rehearsal process with the actors, and then through the various performances and the many different places that you've had this play. What have you discovered, changed, omitted from its original inception, if anything?
Okay, so I'm going to try and summarise that. Forgive me if I get it a little bit wrong. So over the development of this play, with all the different sort of actors who've worked on it, all the different realisations you've seen on it. Sorry, I can't remember the last.
Oh, just or even through the rehearsal process, are there any changes or omissions of character or of story that occurred?
Have there been many changes or omissions of character or story?
I would say the biggest change, and this is the one that kind of unlocked the piece, I worked for it for the first 2 years. There was no Woodnut character. Detective Morris had an even, she's a difficult role, and she had the even increasingly onerous task of reading almost everything that happened in the Hideaway from the perspective of Mr. Woodnut. And you didn't actually see that happening, you had to listen to her read it. So it went on for 2 years developing it this way, and I made up this whole backstory about her having, because it was very important to me for Morris to have met Sims at a point prior to this interrogation. So for that version, I made up this actually kind of fun story about she had had an educational game that she had played when she was a little girl, and he had been a programmer of that game and had appeared as a demon figure in that game, and she was a hunter, and she slew him in the game, and it was emotional for her. And it was very detailed, and it was delivered in another Morris monologue, and I really loved that idea. But what was happening was listening to it, and it was the concept was there, but the execution just felt really ponderous. And then Neil Keller, who directed the world premiere in Los Angeles 2 years ago, he came to a reading of it. This was 2 years into development, and he said, "I think you need to add an actor to play Woodnut." And I was like, I've been working on this for 2 years. I'm not adding an actor. It's got 4 actors in it, that's how it goes. I really just dismissed it. About a month later, he said again, you should think about adding an actor. And I thought about it, and then I agreed to do it, and that theater gave me the workshop support I needed to rewrite the script in this way. But then I wrote the whole Hideaway line with Mr. Woodnut, and that not only made the play just so much more enjoyable, but in that last scene where the 3 of them, where he's hiding under the bed, it provided the scene where we get all of them in this little, those others are there, and we get this little, we get that scene. We also get the scene with him and Sims drinking the cognac, which satisfied my desire to have these 2 characters have met before the interrogation room. It kind of, this one thing solved a lot of the narrative problems in the play too. And that happened about a year before the production is when I started working on that rewrite. That's probably the biggest thing.
Brilliant. Yes.
Can I ask, I've never been on a virtual reality exciting and compelling watching and very complex. But can I ask, have you spent a lot of time in virtual reality rooms on the net?
So Jen, have you spent a lot of time in virtual reality on the internet?
Well, the closest thing there is to the Nether right now, I would say, is Second Life. But if you ever get on a Second Life, you'll find, I don't think it's that much fun. Now, people get really caught up in this thing, but I think it doesn't, it's free, so it's not, it doesn't, it's very sticky, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And you see these people kind of walking around, and they have these speech bubbles over them, and but, so that, I don't care for Second Life at all. I've just kind of checked in to see what's going on there. But I did get into, there was a previous play I wrote about video games and suburban teenagers and zombies, and I started playing World of Warcraft for that. And I played that for 6 months, and I had to stop because it was taking up so much time. And that's a game, you subscribe to, and it's just incredibly done. And I remember even, I had this character I was working on leveling up, and it's, I mean, for the moment you go onto World of Warcraft, you just get completely sucked in because you're immediately, like, go here, kill 10 bats, and you get a new vest, and you get that much more powerful, and you level up. Yeah, you start, like, when you're level 1, you have to kill things like bats. Or boars, or wolves, or something, real low level like that.
How did you get on with the elves?
Well, so you don't get me started, because the elves were other characters. And if you were a blood elf, well, there was a horde and a lot. First, when you go in, you have to choose whether you're a horde or the alliance. And the alliance are kind of like the good guys, and the horde are like the bad guys. So I was like a horde, I was like troll, and I was a hunter. So, it's just. But I remember when I would play this, and I was at I had about 6 months in my life where I did have free time because I was traveling around, and I had a bit more free time than usual. I wasn't having to work a job, and I would get on this game, and even the login screen, you're using your name and your password, but it would come up on my computer, and my character would come up, and there'd be this like sky, the sunset sky with the clouds moving, and I would have my little boar by me. When you're a hunter, you have an animal that you train who helps you kill things. My boar would be up beside me on these rocks, and we'd be standing there, and this music would be playing, dun dun da 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 dun da 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 dun da da da, and I would just get this adrenaline rush. And then I was playing, I was playing with friends in the game. There were people who I knew who were higher level than me who would help me level up, and I would take screenshots of us in the game. I sometimes go back through my screenshots of that game like you would go through a photo album. You can make your character wave, so. There was one time I got a mount. You have to walk for the first 30 levels. When you get to level 30, you get a mount. So my friends showed up to help me get my mount. It was kind of like a mount party. And we all waved, and I took a screenshot, so I still have this wonderful screenshot where I look at all of us waving at the camera the day I got my mount, and it's still like special to me.
I remember you saying about this game that you actually had a very, very close friend who, it was the way that you kept in touch with each other when you were living quite far away.
Yeah, she's in New York, and I was in LA, and we would play like 3 nights a week. Normally we'd spoke on the phone once every 2 months, and we were playing about 3 times a week together. And it was a really, we would go run quests together, and it was literally like we were hanging out together, and her character would get new pieces, and I'd be like, hey, dude, nice glasses, where'd you get that? Oh, well, I did this quest over in Duratar, and I got these cool, So, and then she ended up like playing for 5 years and getting total like playing every night and joining a guild and becoming very serious about it and having to go cold turkey. So it's a real thing. But it's kind of like, you gotta have your crazy times. I don't regret any of it.
How old were you then? How old?
How old were you then?
Game?
I was, at that time, I was 37. You're never too old to get caught up in this kind of stuff, I don't think.
What made you stop?
What made you stop?
I was spending a lot of time playing the game. I was already in web design, so here I was on the computer doing web design. I was also writing on the computer, and then here I was playing the game on the computer. It was getting very intense to be on the computer all the time. But the other part of it was that in the game you don't just go and fight things, you also have to go into cities and go to the auction house, and I was a hunter, so I collected skins from all the animals I killed, so I had to go into the city and buy materials to turn those leather things into jerkins and sell them on the auction house for gold. I mean, it gets very detailed. So when I wasn't playing the game, when I was at work or something, I would pull out a piece of paper and I'd make a grocery list for the auction house. So I was, even when I wasn't playing the game, I was what was going to happen when I got back into the game. And it, you know, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I could go back and play it right now. I mean, it makes me wistful every time I talk about it.
Jeremy, have you spent much time in virtual reality?
No, I directed this play, that's quite enough of that. Never again. No, I haven't, so it's fascinating. It's like another culture. It's like stepping into, you know, different rules. So, yeah, I can't add anything.
Any more questions?
The chopping thing.
Oh, the axe. Tell us about the axe.
The axe, well, the axe first started as, like I said, I was brewing about the story. I was a web designer. I was working with this programmer, and I was telling him my idea. Oh, I think that, you know, I'm going to write this play about where these people go in and molest children. And he said, well, you know, I don't think molesting is enough. I think they need to murder them, too. And I was like, how can I do molesting and murdering? And it was actually kind of, how do you do those two things? They're actually very different in a way. But my idea with the chopping was that it was part of Papa's regimen to kind of bring people into the world. I think different people brought things to the chopping. I think Mr. Doyle kind of felt like it was the way in which you completely dissolved into a world of no right and wrong. That in terms of thinking about him thinking about the universe and him thinking about what God is, then you take away right and wrong. Like right and wrong is something that we have created in order to the polarity is something that's been created. It's more of a rip in the universe as opposed to the unity of the universe. And if we could take that away, then what is just left is pure being. So. And my idea was it for Papa was it was a way to make people complicit in the world, and that once this kind of sense of right and wrong dissolved, you would be of the world. And I think of this world as also a place where, I mean, even with World of Warcraft, when you met another person who played World of Warcraft, you got really excited. You know, I think it's like drug addicts where they're like, oh, you do heroin too? Awesome, man, let's go back to my house and do heroin. You know, you feel like the sense of community. So it was a way for Papa to like really bring people into the world.
I have a question for you.
Okay, right over there.
Thanks. I guess it's in regards to the character of Iris, and I found it really fascinating because in the process of writing her, because she exists in this imaginary realm, in that dimension, what's going on and who she is to you as a writer becomes, because it's in this permissible space, because you know that she's Mr. Doyle. But then I guess my question is about that transition from Iris in the script to Iris on stage and you handling that as a director. And I guess I'm wondering about the process of care and how that goes, because you're actually dealing with a young girl on stage, and maybe you could both speak on your relationship with the character Iris and how you handle that relationship.
So this is a question about the character of Iris and her characterization as a young girl, and how the young girls, the care that's taken with the young girls while on stage.
I'll start that off and then I'll hand it over to you in terms of the care of the young girl. But when I was writing it, first of all, I thought no one will produce this. Should I age up the child? No, that doesn't feel right. Should I don't know, whatever. I'm just gonna have to keep going with it. I saw it in development with a college student. She was about 20 years old. She played the role, and it was so creepy because, you know, you could just do anything with an adult. And it was very cold and very creepy. And then the next workshop, there was a 12-year-old actress in New York who was in the role, and suddenly the play had so much more warmth, and the audience was kind of removed from, the audience kind of knew that nothing was truly going to happen to this child, and really it was kind of that native warmth that a child brings that I realized was really important to the chemistry of the play.
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? There it is. Yeah, it's When we started the process at the Royal Court with Jeremy Herrin, who's the casting director, Jen, after several conversations with Jen had said, look, it's got to be a real child. The child's got to be young. It's got to be young enough. So I ignored that, and Julia and I started a process where we tried to find an actress who was over 16, in order to see if we could. You don't know this, no? In order to give that due process, because it felt like such a complicated, terrifying territory to step into as a director, and we couldn't. It's not that we couldn't find anybody, but it just didn't work, and it didn't represent the play, and it didn't represent all the things that Jen's talking about. So we steeled ourselves with colleagues at Headlong and at the court to go down the road of finding the right age of an actress and to make sure that everything was in place. So we took a whole lot of advice from the NSPCC, from Bernardo's, from an internet charity, from a counsellor friend of mine who looks after children in certain different degrees of trouble, and we worked out a strategy. The first thing that we did was that we made sure that in terms of the edit of the script, if you're Iris and you're only playing Iris and you're not involved in interrogation scenes, you don't do anything that you wouldn't be asked to do if you were a child playing somebody's daughter in EastEnders or any other drama. So if you separate the actual bare bones of the dramatic tasks that Iris has to do, she doesn't have to get into any of that territory. Yes, it feels really terrifying for the audience because as an audience out here, we're joining those dots. We're hearing the information in the interrogation scene because the time frame is so plotted in such a sophisticated way. We know much more and we're adding a lot of that stuff. But actually when you break it down, Iris's journey is relatively untraumatic, and we have a whole lot of protocols in place whereby the girls can communicate. We talk their family through the whole thing. You know, they've all got to get out at any point. And crucially, we have a kind of an open session whereby they can bring anything up that they're concerned about or that they're worried about, and they've got free rein to ask any questions. And rather than indulging an adult audience in these rather grey areas of ethical questions and really exercising where we are as a society in terms of all of this material, we made a very strong choice early on to be very clear morally about what we're doing with this show, so that we've contextualised it all the way along in a way that's consistent with education in terms of internet safety and all of that stuff. So that's kind of been the challenge. You know, you see before you some really sophisticated acting choices and some wonderful design work, and clearly a masterclass in playwriting. But for me and my team, it was really about keeping those girls absolutely safe all the way along, and to take that the most seriously, because any sort of playful engagement with an audience about such complicated ethical issues would be meaningless if there were some children who were unhappy behind the scene. So I'm glad that you asked the question and I could say all of that, because I know that it's kind of the fact that there is a child involved in the evening is a difficult one. It's a way of enforcing the serious intention of the play, and I'm absolutely with hand on heart sort of able to say that we've absolutely looked after everybody in the way that we should have done.
Brilliant. So I think we've got time for about 2 more questions. So, a girl at the back with the red t-shirt and glasses with a flower in her hair. You.
I'm a production designer, so I really enjoyed your set design. It was really great. One of the things I liked about it was the emphasis on the Victorian aspect of the Nether, and sort of how that will mirror the Industrial Revolution and how it was viewed at the time, especially in this country. And sort of, do you think that that will reflect how we look at the digital revolution? Sort of those parallels, was that in the thought process there? And how did the floors work?
So this is two questions. So the first question is about the relationship between the Victorian age in the play and the age of new technology that we're now in, and what the relationship is between those. And the second question is just how do the floors work?
I'll take the first one. I guess the Victorian era, I thought the Victorian era was appropriate because of there was an Alice in Wonderland kind of quality to the Victorian era. You know, it's supposed to be about innocence, but there was so much going on at that time period, and there was a lot going on for children at that time period. The Industrial Revolution was happening, which I do think of, you know, whenever there's a major technological revolution, it really shakes people up. I think we're in the middle of another one now, been in it for a while. And things start changing very quickly. So yes, that was done on purpose. I'm trying to think of what other hideaway, you know, where else would you go? If it wasn't the hideaway, if it wasn't Victorian, what would it be, you know?
But the Victorian era is the perfect choice. I mean, you know, there's something really sort of icky about the construction of childhood innocence and the technological revolution. I think that's exactly right. You know, in order to write a play about it, I think that was one of the most inspired choices that Jen made. To write a play that is only about what is happening now, the most contemporary subject that we can't even get our heads around. I mean, we can't get our heads around, so we need art like this in order to come together, to put our phones away for an hour and 20 minutes and engage and commune and to really think about these knotty problems. And I do hope that you this evening are like lots of other members of our audience, and the play keeps reverberating and keeps twisting and turning and giving you nourishment. So I think it's a great choice that it's Victorian, particularly in this. I don't know. It felt like there was a kind of nice bridge between American and English culture in that era as well. And in terms of the floors, there are these cyber hoists up there that are very silent and rather excellent motors that bring the floors up and down, rather than the Royal Court where it used, if you know hemp, it was a hemp house, and it was two lads up in the fly floor flying two different floors, and it took a while to get right. It's great here now because it's all perfectly safe and silent, and just really excellent working with Sonia Friedman. And at the Royal Court, you know, in the early previews, what happened was that two guys, they used to get slightly out of sync, and the floor started tipping away like that as all the furniture would. So it took a while. It took a while to get right. It was an achievement to do it there. But here it's strong motors up the stage.
Thank you.